listening to the Post-Apocalyptic Media Podcast, your source for all the latest post-apocalyptic news.
Hello and welcome back to this 94th episode of the Post-Apocalyptic Media Podcast. I'm your host, Sean, senior editor here at Post-Apocalyptic Media. Now, it's been a couple weeks, right? The rumors are false. I haven't been abducted by aliens. I'm here. It's been really busy, crazy time of year, leading up to the holidays. So that's basically been it. It's not, like I said, the rumors are not true. Just kidding. There are no rumors. So one big thing though, that I want to talk about this week, and this is I want to dedicate like this entire show to this because I feel like it's the biggest news and it shades all other news that's happened in our favorite genre. And that's the end of Walking Dead, right? The finale for Walking Dead happened last weekend. If you're not a Walking Dead fan, you're not going to enjoy this episode. Sorry. Or maybe you will, from an outsider's perspective. And there's going to be spoilers. So if you haven't seen that episode, I usually try to stay away from spoilers, but I think last year I used to do a spoiler filled, like podcast episode, like an extra episode, that was focused entirely on each episode of the show. But I don't do that. I haven't done that for this season or for at least this part of the season. But I think that this is it. This is, it's the finale. I figure it deserves it, right? It deserves to have have me sit there and talk about it. That's a weird way of saying it, but yeah, that's how I feel about doing this kind of finale thing. But I guess before I do that, let's get into, I just want to cover some of the, the basics that are on the site. So we have still a lot of stuff going on. Handmaid's Tale is still knocking it out of the park. We still have, Chainsaw Man is probably one of the biggest topics on our website right now. I haven't watched any of it, but if you want to check that out, if you're into Chainsaw Man, check it out on our site. We have coverage of everything. Episode 7 is coming up, and Stephanie writes reviews for each episode and also, articles about the upcoming episodes, things like that. We also have, so Tina did this great article called 10 Apocalypse Skills You Can Practice at Home, which is very cool. And she also did a Black Rock Shooter Dawn Fall episode 5 recap and review. That's a mouthful. But so she's been doing coverage of that. Handmaid's Tale season 5 episode 11 is a big mystery, right? So we have a lot of things going on, a lot of stuff going on the site, and a lot of coverage, and definitely check that out. But now we're going to get into the spoilers because I'm really excited. Like when I watch the finale, the Walking Dead finale, I'm like, I can't wait. I kind of can't wait to talk about this. This is kind of like a big, exciting thing for me to do, on the podcast itself, and especially since it's been 2 weeks. That's a long time to not sit here and talk to myself in front of a microphone, right? So let's get into it. So this is season 11, right? Episode 24. Big extended season, right? There's more episodes than a normal season. This show's been going on for 12 years, 11 seasons. I mean, if you think about it, 12 years ago, what were you doing 12 years ago? I mean, 12 years ago, I only had 2 kids. Now I have 4. So, I mean, it's like, that's a long time ago, right? In my eyes, especially. And so a lot of people have grown up with The Walking Dead. Maybe they started watching it when they were a teenager, and then they got to the point where now they're, probably went through high school and college and have a career now. And like there's a lot of different stages that can happen in 12 years. So I think that this is, not only is it a monumental show, in that regard, in time wise and things like that. It's just been a big deal for a lot of people, and they've grown up with it, like I said. So for it to all come to an end like this, it was a lot of pressure for the creators, right? And well, for not necessarily the creators, because they're not there anymore. It's the current showrunners, we'll say that. And that's a touchy subject, actually. There's a lawsuit going on about the creators. But that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about this episode. So the finale, leading up to it, we had a lot of stuff happening. It's kind of the classic Walking Dead thing where the group gets separated into little groups, and either by choice or kind of other things happen where, this group, this like 3 person group goes over here. This one gets captured by someone. This one does, you know what I mean? It's kind of in every season, and it's definitely been in this season. There's been all that stuff. We've been dealing with the Commonwealth. That's kind of the main antagonist of this season. Pamela Milton, the governor of the Commonwealth. It was supposed to be this utopia, and we got led into the Commonwealth, I believe, in season 10, if I remember. I mean, season 11, this season alone has lasted since last August. That's when it started. So that's a long time. They had, 3 parts to it. It was broken up. There was like a break between each part. So, it's one of those things where it's just taken a long time. And if you think back, even season 10 was almost 2 years ago, when it was on. So it's normal to forget where we're at and what's been going on, but that's where we're at. The Commonwealth is the big enemy. Pamela Milton is the big enemy. Lance Hornsby was the big enemy for a while, and then he died. And so we're up to the point now where everyone is just ready to get rid of Pam. They're ready to take the Commonwealth back. They know that the citizens of the Commonwealth are actually good people, right? It's not the citizens they're worrying about. It's the government. It's the troopers, the people who look like stormtroopers, and which, I mean, side note, I think looks completely ridiculous, but it was in the comic book. So there you go. And so we have the troopers, we have the government, we have all of these people who are kind of working together to make life hell for the survivors. And we had a group of survivors who wanted to stay in the Commonwealth, like even when they talked about overthrowing Pamela Milton, they said, well, once we get her out, we'll stay in the Commonwealth. It's a great place. It's very safe, and Alexandria didn't work out, and Oceanside didn't work out, and Hilltop didn't work out. So we're going to go ahead and stay here. Well, that's not going to happen now. It's a little impossible now. So let's start from the beginning. So I'm gonna pull this article up that I wrote. This is my own review and recap that I need to look at because I need to, kind of refresh my memory. So the thing that started out with Daryl carrying Judith, who had just been shot by Pamela Milton at the end of episode 23. They were down in, I think it was a train, like a Grand Central Station train station in the Commonwealth, and the troopers were up top shooting down Pamela's guys, and then Pamela grabbed the gun from them, kind of like, here, let me do it, and she shot down and she hit Judith because Judith jumped in the way, and she kind of freaked out when that happened, and Daryl picked her up and ran with her, and it was very reminiscent of back when Rick did the same with Coral, and you might remember that. I don't remember what season that was. It was way back there. And, Carl was shot and Rick's just running with them. And it's like slow motion, every angle kind of thing. And it was the same thing here. Daryl picks up Judith and is running with her. And there's undead everywhere. And, it's a pretty intense scene. Well, this episode starts out with him. It's kind of her vision. Like she has kind of blurry vision and it's kind of in and out. And she sees Daryl get knocked out by some troopers, but she's still laying on this gurney and she's out of it. She's just been shot. Well, she comes to, she hears the undead trying to break through. So she bars the doors and everything, and she makes sure that they can't come in. And to me, this seemed like a really kind of a normal episode, like that's how a normal Walking Dead episode would start. But I think the biggest takeaway from this was Judith did survive. We thought she was going to die. I mean, I even thought it. I wrote it in the review for the last episode before this. I said, I think this might be it for Judith. That might be the big cliffhanger. They say someone's going to die, or rumors are saying that there was going to be a major character who is going to pass, and it wasn't Judith. Of course, it was someone else. We'll talk about in a second, but yeah, it wasn't Judith. She actually pulled out of it. Daryl gave her a blood transfusion. He had a great line in here where Carol was like, "Hey, the blood types have to match up. You can't just go pouring your blood into someone's veins." And he says, "Well, it's fine. I have the kind that's universal. What is that? O, I think, something like that. O positive." And he says, "I have universal blood, and I used to sell it. Merle used to that's his older brother, used to make me sell it when we were kids because that's worth the most money." So that was a cool little touch, I thought. And so he was able to do a blood transfusion with her, saved her life. Yumi's brother Tommy, is it Tommy? I think that's what his name is. He's actually a doctor, and he did the kind of the finishing touches on Judith to kind of get her, to get her 100%, well, maybe 80%, where she's able to walk around and stuff. So that was cool. That's settled. Judith is alive. Judith is fine, and we'll probably see her again. I don't know. That's my take on it. And so at that point, we see where they start getting into the other groups. There's the other groups are kind of coming together. You might remember in the episode before, Luke and Jules made an appearance. Luke and Jules were from Oceanside earlier in the season, I think also in season 10. But they didn't last long. Like, we were excited to see them at the end of last episode. And then this one, they come along and they just pretty much right off the bat, they get bitten. And it's crazy because like Jules got killed there. Like, she got just ripped apart. Luke gets his leg bitten. And so they cut his leg off. They take him back to like this little makeshift hospital and they cut his leg off. But he doesn't make it. And it's this whole thing where they pull out his harmonica because he's known for playing his harmonica, and it's a really heartfelt kind of scene. Well, I think that this was like the light heartfelt scene because they get a lot more heartfelt later on in this episode. So that was, the name of this episode is Rest in Peace. And I feel like there were many instances where you could say rest in peace. So here we are. Jules, rest in peace. Luke, rest in peace, right? And so they're right off the bat, 2 people dead. Now, it felt a little cheap to me because it was like they brought him back just to die, and it was like, well, okay, I guess it doesn't have that much effect when they do it like that. But still, they were a big part of the season 10, I think, back there somewhere. So they're dead. Rest in peace. And then we go on to show the group getting together. We see, well, eventually, I'm probably going to go out of order here, but eventually we get Elijah and what's his name? The other guy. They come back. Jerry, yeah. Elijah and Jerry come back, and we were worried about them before because Lydia got her arm bitten and they chopped it off, and then so they didn't really show like any kind of cool spiked ball weapon like Aaron has, but she did get her arm cut off, and then she was really worried about Elijah. But we see him come back, and we see Jerry come back, so that's cool. They're not dead. We see a couple other people kind of getting together. We see one woman who was in earlier in season 11. I forgot her name. I don't think they even really said her name, but she came back just randomly. Now the big thing here, I think probably the big loss was it came up pretty soon, about in the middle of the episode, or pretty early on, and that was Rosita. Now Rosita has been around for a long time. I don't even know what season it's been when she first, she came with Abraham and Eugene when they were in that really badass truck, and so she's like a second tier OG, I guess, maybe third tier, but somewhere around there. And so she's been with this show for a long time. Well, there's a scene where she and Gabriel and Eugene are hopping across buildings. They're kind of getting away from the undead, and she falls. She's climbing up this pipe and she falls. And at first you're like, whoa, because the swarm, the horde just covers her, right? And the view is from the top, so it's a really great view. It's good angle. And so she gets covered up and you're like, wow. So she's gone. Well, then a second later, she pops up, she cuts off a bunch of their heads and she escapes. She's ready. She's, able to escape. Gabriel's happy because of course that's his baby mama. So, and also she had his baby. Coco was in her little wrap thing. And so it wasn't just Rosita, it was Rosita and Coco in trouble right there. So they got out. She was able to climb up. Everything seemed fine. Well, again, I'm going to jump the timeline a little bit here because they go back and forth with this. But she reveals later to Eugene that she actually did get bitten. And she says, he's saying all this stuff like, oh, I bet you can't wait to go back to Oceanside and bring Coco to the beach and just kind of do all this stuff. And she's just like, yeah, see, the thing is. And then she tells him, I got bit. And he gets really sad. It's a sad moment, but it doesn't compare to later on. Wow. Later on when she's actually dying, which by the way, I think she might hold the record for the longest person on this show to get bitten and then take a lot of time to actually die. Thankfully though, here's one thing I'm thankful for, because my wife and I were watching this and when she did pass, she was laying on the bed. She was holding Coco and she was like saying her goodbyes to Gabriel and Eugene and everyone. And then Gabriel kind of takes Coco and is like, okay, well, we got to get the baby out of here because you could eat the baby at any time. So he kind of takes the baby and they don't show her dying. They don't show that. They don't show her turning, which I was anticipating, and they don't show who killed her, like who put her out of her misery. You know what I mean? Because that was something I was wondering about when it was happening. I'm like, she's laying on this bed, very peaceful, very sad scene. And she's going to turn, and are we going to watch her turn? Like, she's been such a key character. Well, they didn't show it. They didn't show that. And they didn't show who, quote unquote, dispatched her. So I'm glad they didn't put that in. I think it would have been, it's nice to have the last thing you remember of her not being turned. It's kind of like Glenn, the last thing you remember of Glenn is when he had his eyeball sticking out, right? It made for an amazing scene, but it's the last thing we remember of Glenn. And actually, Maggie even talks about that in this episode. We'll get to that in a second. But so yeah, it was a crazy time, I think, where Rosita died, Luke died, Jules died, and so I think Rosita was of course the one that the rumors were saying, a major character is going to die. That's who they're talking about. And so it was sad, right? It was a really sad, heart-wrenching scene. So rest in peace, Rosita. Now, let's get to the Negan and Maggie stuff. So Negan and Maggie, of course, they have a spin-off show coming up called Dead City. It's supposed to come out in April of 2023. So we know, those two hate each other. Well, Maggie hates him. He's trying to reconcile. He's trying really hard. But there's no coming back from what he did to Maggie's husband, And so they're finally able to sit down and talk about it. And it actually, there's two different scenes where this happens. One time he has a high powered rifle that he's going to go shoot Pamela Milton, and she catches him and she says, wait a minute, like, let me help you. And he's basically saying, well, I don't want you to do this because if you do, you're going to catch all the flack from it and everyone's going to be after you. And so he says he's going to do it. Well, she kind of takes the gun and it's like, well, I'll do it. And at that point, this is like his first apology where he really says, you know what? I understand now what you're going through because of my own. I almost lost, my own family, my wife and my unborn child. And I know now what it's like. Like I know that feeling. And he says, I understand. I was about to lose everything. And I finally understood what you must have felt, is the exact quote. But then here it comes. He says, I'm so sorry for what I took from you and what I took from your son. And he's talking about Glenn, of course. And so Maggie has this look on her face like, oh, okay, we're finally here, right? Like years later, after all your BS. I mean, there were many times there where he seemed nice, but then when you see him away from Maggie, he was actually still kind of a jerk. Remember that scene where he found Lucille, the bat, and he held it in his arms and he put his jacket back on and it was kind of like, uh-oh, is he going to go back to his old Negan ways? But he didn't. And now I think he's really at the point, it might be the gray beard, but there's really a point now where he is just, he's heartily sorry and he is determined to make her know that. And he's probably going to have to overcompensate for that for a long, long time, right? And so she kind of lets the apology sink in a little bit, but then she's like, okay, well, let's go. Let's just go. Are you coming with me? Like, we're going to go kill Pamela. So they go up to this high part of the building and we don't hear anything for a little while. Then, there's a bunch of other scenes that happen with Mercer and like a standoff between one half of the troopers and Pamela's half of the troopers. And then it turns out where Mercer is able to convince all the troopers that Pamela is the one who's been doing all the bad stuff right now. She has a bunch of people outside the gates and she's willing to let them die. So they see the truth of what Mercer's talking about. And so they turn on Pamela and they arrest her finally, right? Finally, Pamela's arrested. And then there's this really cool scene. I'll get back to Maggie Negan in a second, but a really cool scene where at the gates, there's undead at the gates. The survivors come in, they're fine, but then they close the gates back. And one of the undead that's sitting at the gates is this guy with an arrow through his throat. And it took me a second to realize who he was. He's sitting there, clawing, and he's trying to get to her. And he seems really, really excited about eating her face, right? And it's kind of, it's like, who is this guy? And you have to really look. And I noticed it's actually Lance Hornsby, who was, her, I guess, second in command at one point, and then he got killed. And it was interesting to see him like that because she was kind of drawn to him. She's getting closer and closer, and she was really, and I was like, oh, please let him just grab her and eat her face and let her go like that. It'd be great. But it didn't happen. Maggie actually shot Lance in the head and, so close that the blood splattered onto Pamela's face, and Pamela's still alive. Like, Pamela made it. All these other people died in this episode, but Pamela Milton, she made it to live another day. Yeah, I don't know. So that was a crazy thing. But then also, so we go back to Maggie and Negan, right? Later on, they're sitting together, they're talking, and she kind of, she talks about what she felt and what she feels every time she sees Negan. And she says, I hear him calling for me, talking about Glenn, of course, and I hear you mocking him while he's dying. I thought that was a powerful line because, sure, watching your spouse die is probably a pretty insane situation. But then to watch the person who killed your spouse sit there and mock them, and there's nothing you can do about it because he has a bunch of people who, have you all restrained, and there's nothing you can do because other people who did try to do something about it also got killed, like Abraham, right? So it's pretty crazy. I mean, I know that broke her. It just broke her in half right there. And for that to be a thing that she still says she thinks about every single time she sees Negan years later, she says, I hear you mocking him while he's dying. She says, so I can't forgive you, even though I'm so grateful that you saved my son. She explains that she's grateful for the things that he's done so far to try to make up for it. She says, I can't forgive you. And you can tell the look on Negan's face. He's like, okay, well, I guess fair is fair. But he does understand now, I think, especially with his family, with his own family. But I think that this was the gateway that we needed. She says she doesn't want to hate him anymore. She doesn't want to walk around hating him all the time. So this is the gateway we needed to go to that spinoff, Dead City. And so I think it'll work out. I think a lot of us couldn't imagine how this could work out. How could those two be in a spinoff together? Well, it's still going to be a lot of animosity, but I think this kind of opens the door for it being a little more practical, maybe, for them to be working together. Maybe a little bit. So, yeah, it's some good stuff, and I'm excited for the spinoff. I think it'll be good. Now, speaking of spinoffs, there's also, they touch a lot on the spinoffs at the end of this episode, where they explain the Dead City, of course, the Daryl Dixon spinoff, which makes sense because at the end of this, he kind of just goes off on his own. So we have that. And then we have the variants, which are supposed to be a big part of his spinoff. The variant zombies who can climb and throw rocks through windows and grab stuff and pick up a knife and, stuff like that. They're a little more intelligent, a little more dexterous, I guess you could say. So yeah, there's Daryl's. And then, we have another season of Fear the Walking Dead. But the big one here, this is the big one that I'm really excited about. It's Rick and Michonne, right? So at the end of this episode, we see 1 year later, we see Eugene and Max have a baby, and they named her Rosie, which I guess is Rosita, and Ezekiel is now the governor of it. It actually looks like Alexandria because they have the windmill. It's all painted up, so it looks like Alexandria was rebuilt. And because they blew up the Commonwealth. I forgot to mention that. They blew up the Commonwealth. It's like one of the greatest scenes that was building up. Everyone was building up to this, and Daryl, Norman Reedus, the actor who plays Daryl, said that the season is going to go out with a bang. The whole show is going to go out with a bang. Well, there you go. They blew up the Commonwealth with tons and tons of fuel, with wicks, and I don't know where they got all this stuff, but it's pretty amazing. So that was something that happened, and it was kind of a bittersweet end to the Commonwealth, but also it took out probably 1,000 zombies or more. It was a pretty cool scene. So anyway, we go back to Alexandria. Ezekiel is now the governor. He's making a speech, and he says that his lieutenant governor is none other than Michael Mercer, right? So we have Mercer now as the lieutenant governor. He's always in that position. He's like second in command. I feel like he's happy in that position. He's like the leader of the military. He doesn't want to rule, but he has some really great ideas. It was his idea to blow up the Commonwealth. So he's the lieutenant governor. We see some touches of where things are going. Like I mentioned, Daryl riding off into the sunset. He says he'll be back. He tells Carol. Now this was a very heartwarming scene. Also, he tells Carol, "I'll see you again. This isn't the last you're going to see of me." And he tells her goodbye. He says he loves her, and she says she loves him back. It's such a great relationship that those two have because it's, I don't know. I come from a place. Well, not originally. Where I live now is a place where male, female, men and women can't be friends without suspicion of something weird. You know what I mean? And I think that where I grew up, that wasn't an issue. It was never. And so it's confusing to me where, men and women can't be friends. So you see, this is such a refreshing breath of fresh air to see it on the show where those two can say that they love each other and be friends and respect each other and everything, but not like, want to bone each other, right? It's fine to be like that and not have to have weird sexual tension that's written into the story. I think it's a great. I think that it's great character development with those two, because Daryl likes Connie, and he liked Leah for a while, and then he had to kill her. So it's and I think Carol's backstory also plays a big part of that. He respects where she came from, and what happened, and it's just weird to think that if you get a man and a woman together that they're automatically going to have to battle some kind of sexual tension immediately. It's not the case at all. So I really, this is a great character set for me. Anyway, this could have gone a lot differently, and I feel like they almost had this written before when Melissa McBride, the actress who's playing Carol, was originally going to go with Daryl on a spinoff, right? They were going to have the Daryl and Carol spinoff. And then she said, you know what? I've been doing this for 12 years. She's one of the OGs. She's been in the first season, like what, second episode, something like that. It was right up there at one of the first episodes, her and Daryl. And she's been doing this for 12 years. And she's just like, you know what? I need a break. I need to spend time with my family. I don't want to go to France and just be away from my family for another long time period. So it's understandable. I totally get it. But that kind of turned Daryl's spinoff into just the Daryl Dixon spinoff. And this farewell thing that's going on right here, it could have been different. It could have been different if it was like, I can't wait till you join me in France, or whatever is going to happen. But instead, it's more like, I will see you again. This isn't the last you're going to see of me. I'll be back. He literally said, I'll be back. So yeah, that was sad. So we have the Rosita sadness. We have this sadness. Then we get into the Rick and Michonne stuff, right? And I think this was interesting because people were kind of expecting this because it was rumored that Rick would be back. But I think also a lot of people, including myself, were like, yeah, right. Why just like stop saying Rick's coming back. He's not coming back. Well, he did come back. He came back for this last part of this episode, he and Michonne, and it was great. It was so great. It was a great ending to the season, to the episode, to the entire series. It was great. So it looks like he's on an island. He's kind of, he's barefoot. He has a jacket on. He looks really dirty, really kind of, disheveled. And he's writing a letter to Judith, and he's saying, all this stuff about kind of like instructions for her. And he's saying, I still think of all the living and all the dead every day. I still see their faces. So it goes through this montage of every single person who's ever been on the show and died, as kind of a main character or secondary character. And I mean, there were some in there you're like, oh, I remember that person. Who is that? What was their name? So it went through all these in this big, like kind of blurry montage, which was pretty cool. And then Michonne is talking also. And at first I thought they were together. I thought maybe she found him, but then you kind of get the hint that they're apart and they're both talking to Judith. They're both kind of writing a letter to Judith and talking to her, if she ever finds this. And Rick actually has a piece of paper that he's writing on. He puts it in a bottle and he throws it out into the ocean. And I don't know, maybe she'll get that one day. That'd be great. But Michonne's, can I just talk about Michonne's armor real quick? Michonne's armor was spectacular. It was this leather. It was like very, I don't know. It was very like, it was medieval, but it was also like something that you would see in a video game. Very, very like colorful. It wasn't just all drab, like brown leather, armor. It was very well made. It was very ornate, and it had this, like a fencing mask on the top, and it looked oriental. It looked very intricate. I really, really enjoyed how that looked. It was kind of a reddish color, very cool. And of course she had her samurai sword to go along with it. And so she's riding a horse. She's riding at the very last thing we see of her is riding into this horde of zombies. I mean, when I say horde, I'm talking about like it's just endless zombies, and she's riding into them. So who knows, what that's going to turn into? I'm sure she's just going to clear a path. But then we go back to Rick and we see him with his, bare feet. And he's standing on the beach, this muddy beach, and there's just there's undead faces like popping out of the mud and like trying to bite his feet, and he he stabs one. But while he's doing this, while he throws the bottle out and all that stuff, and then you hear a chopper overhead, and it says something about, let me see if I can find the exact words. Consignee Grimes, you've been located and are instructed to surrender. And Rick screams, no, like he's like, oh, they found me again. And but he gives up. Like they say, put your hands up. And so he does it. He just puts his hands up, and so it makes me think he's beaten down. Like this has happened before. He's probably escaped before. They keep finding him, and he's like, come on, but he's not going to fight it because he knows that what they'll do to him. I don't know, something like that. And one thing that the voice says at the end there, they say, come on, Rick, it's like he told you, there's no escape for the living. So who's he? What does that mean, he? I imagine we'll find out in the spinoff. I think that's a great, great lead in to that spinoff, a great cliffhanger that we'll just have to find out. And I don't think that there's any date yet. Like Dead City, the Negan Maggie one, has a date of April of next year. And the Daryl one doesn't have an official date, and this one doesn't have an official date. So we'll find out. I'm sure it'll be a couple years from now. If they haven't even, begun shooting it yet, we don't know. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. I really like that ending. I like the montage. It was kind of cheesy, admittedly, to do it like that. I mean, that's the way everyone does a final episode like that. It's like the Seinfeld finale, right? But it worked. It was great to see all those people again. It was great to see Rick in something that wasn't a montage, like an actual, new content. And Michonne also was her armor. It was absolutely fantastic armor. I hope she wears that in the spinoff, and I hope she makes a set for Rick. That's what I hope. It's just really cool. They'd be, like intricate leather twins with swords. Yeah, they could do it. They could pull it off, right? But I'm excited for it. I think in that order, I think the Rick Michonne spinoff, number 1, number 2 would be the Daryl one, and number 3 would be the Maggie and Negan one. And I only put that one down there. Not that I don't want to see it. It's just I really want to see Rick and Michonne, and then Daryl, and then Negan. I'm not the hugest Negan fan. I think I've said that before, but I am a huge Maggie fan. So, kind of equals it out. So, yeah, those are my really quick and dirty impressions of that finale. I would like to hear what you guys think of it. Did you have similar opinions? I mean, of course, it's not all roses for me. I thought that there was nothing particularly groundbreaking about it as far as, well, like I said, there was the montage was very typical, things like that. There were a lot of unanswered questions still, which I understand. They want to answer those in the spinoffs. But man, what bothered me the most? I have to say it. Daryl's black eye was the worst looking black eye I've ever seen on any show with a budget over $100. It just looked like someone took some black shoe polish, like in the old cartoons, and just made a ring around his eye. Like, have the people who did that, have they ever been hit in the eye before? Do they know that you can't, there's not a perfect circle of black all the way. It made me crazy. I told my wife about it, and we laughed about it while we were watching it. I'm like, it reminds me of like Spanky and his gang. Remember that? Like the Little Rascals with the like perfectly round black eye around. That's what it reminded me of. It was really bad, and it bothered me. It shouldn't have bothered me, but it was distracting. All right, got that out of the way. So other than that, I really liked it. I thought it was a great episode. I thought it was a great ending to the season, to the entire series. So yeah, again, let me know what you think in the comments. Shoot me an email. You can email the site at postapocalypticmedia@gmail.com. If you have, any kind of feedback, you can also just, make a comment on the post. But yeah, I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I don't know. I hope, where do we go from here? What's the next show before Dead City comes out? Let me know. So thanks everyone for listening. And as always, stay alive out there and always be ready for the big one. Bye-bye.